This can be the most difficult step of the entire immigration process to Australia. If you're a self-employed individual or you've been self-employed in the past and you're trying to get a skill assessment for yourself, this can be the most difficult step of the entire immigration process to Australia. Hi, my name is Abby from Migration Centre of Australia. Today I'm going to be talking about what you need to do to try and get a successful skill assessment if you have ever been self-employed or worked as a contractor for the experience that you're claiming. A skill assessment is a process by which you can get your qualifications and or your skills assessed by the governing body of your occupation. Now, this body has been authorised by the government in Australia to carry out skill assessments for your particular occupation. Sometimes there can be an occupation with multiple skill assessing authorities, but usually for most of the occupations, there's only one skill assessing authority. If you have been self-employed or owned your own business or worked as a contractor, this can be very difficult because everything that you provide can be falsified. And that's why there are much more thorough checks and evidence requirements to make sure that you're claiming the right thing. What the assessment body wants to ensure is, for example, if you're running your own business, how much time did you spend actually doing operational side of that business versus, for example, if you're working in IT and you're claiming experience as a software developer or a software engineer, how much of that time in your business did you dedicate towards those specific tasks? And I will talk about a practical scenario that we ran through with a client where we were successful in obtaining a skill assessment, but the amount of hours and time we had to spend to obtain this skill assessment was far more significant than what we had charged or anticipated from that client. While the documentation varies from assessing authority to assessing authority, most of the core documents required are the same. First one is, do you have a business registered or an ABN, for example, in Australia? Are you working as a freelancer? The second one is making sure you have an invoice. So what is the work that you carried out? How many hours did you spend doing that work? If it was part of a contract and you have multiple contracts that you're doing at the same time, for example, you've taken on multiple freelancing jobs at the same time, how much time did you spend every week on each project that you had taken on? And we want to make sure that you have at least 20 hours per week to be able to claim for that week of employment. For example, if you have 10 contracts and each week you spend 5 hours on each of them, right? Cumulatively, you've worked 50 hours in the week. And as long as we can evidence that, we can claim 50 hours of work experience for that week, which means full time. And we'd need to do that for every week that you're claiming. Now let's talk about what you require from each of those projects that you're taking on. So for that project, so let's talk about project one. We would say project one is a 1-year project. Each week you're required to spend 5 hours as working as a software engineer. Right, the next one is a 3-month project where you're spending 5 hours a week during that project. Now, in terms of what you're doing in this contract is you're going to provide a document, a formalized document that shows that you've been engaged and how long you're engaged for and how much time you'd be spending each week. Now, if there's no specific time mentioned in the contract, you can use your invoices as evidence. Now, then those invoices need to be backed up by receipt, and we would go even one step further because invoices and receipts can just be generated. You need to back that up with transactions in the company's bank account or your personal bank account if you're a freelancer or working under an ABN. Because we want to make sure that the invoice and those receipts match what you were paid for, right? So you have a formal agreement, you back that up by invoices, receipts, you back that up by saying, yes, I actually got paid for this work through your bank statement, and then we can back that up by business tax records or your personal tax records. In addition to this, it's important to also focus on getting reference letters, if you can, from each of those projects that you've carried out. So if you've got 10 projects, across a 3-year period that we're claiming for, you need to make sure that you try, especially from the big employment periods that you're claiming, that you can show that you have a reference that you carried this out for. Now, in this situation that we're talking from a practical example, we actually had to prepare an Excel sheet and kind of project plan for each project they did over the last 10 years, because they had a qualification as a commerce degree and an MBA, but they did not have an IT related qualification. So because of this, we were trying to claim as much experience as possible. So we went back 15 years and calculated how much they'd worked and run their business for the last 15 years to claim each piece and record to try and maximize their points for skilled migration. Because they'd been running a business for such a long amount of time, we had to actually get the contracts for everything and then back that up through the invoices, receipts, bank statements, and tax records of the business, but also personal tax records of the director who was running the business. And we had to show how much time he spent on each project each week for the entire 10 years. And the last document that's really important is the statutory declaration. Now, you should provide a statutory declaration for all the claims that you're making and say that it's true and correct. If you don't have a statutory declaration in your country, maybe you're lodging a skill assessment from outside Australia, then a notarized document or an affidavit can work as well. If there are any inconsistencies or insufficient evidence, your application can be refused, or insufficient evidence for a particular work period, that evidence may not be counted towards your claim. Negative decisions usually only occur if you've provided insufficient evidence, you've made a mistake in the application for the dates or something else that you've shown, but they don't match or align with one document versus another. The duties or tasks that you've carried out, especially if as a self-employed person that you're claiming for, may not align as well as you think with your occupation. So it's really important to get those reference letters, statutory declarations. If you've got an agreement, the tasks and duties outlined for the scope of the work that you're carrying out should all be the same. After having handled a lot of self-employed claims when it comes to different skill assessing authorities, it's really important to focus on the documentation and make sure you have the evidence for each piece of work or project that you're carrying out and claiming for. And this should be well documented. We've sometimes gone as far as providing examples of work where there was no NDA, where we can provide examples of work without it breaching any privacy laws. We did do that to make sure that the department knew exactly what project they were working on and what kind of work they were doing as part of their scope of work. If you have any questions, leave them below. We know this can be a really technical period and a stressful period when you're pursuing this, especially as a self-employed person when making these claims. If you do want to contact us, please visit our website or reach out to another professional near you to make sure you have the right guidance for your skill assessment.